Eric, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
I couldn't at first, but I can now.
I was being silent. So the stalwarts, an international crowd has joined us. I love it.
Hello.
And
Good day, sir.
Alistair, you look like you're ready
Hey,
to
mate.
take off a 747.
How's the voice, Cecilia?
It's squeaking. It's not all there yet.
Oh dear, Cecilia, you sound really bad.
I know. I don't sound like that sexy husky voice that you're supposed to have. When
No, I'm really disappointed.
I know. Yeah. How do you think I feel? But at least it's like really pretty out. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see outside?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's foliage time, but they're falling. So is it like 7 o'clock in the morning for you, Chad?
6.
6. Oh, you're further.
Well into the day.
Where are you located? Are you in Queensland?
Yeah, I'm in Brisbane.
Okay.
We just had our clocks changed. We just had our clocks cleaned the other day. So I think that did that make this call easier or harder for you there, Chad?
Easier, because Queensland doesn't believe in daylight savings time. So we don't shift with everybody else, which makes it a bit awkward, some of those cross-state conversations.
Yeah, smart people.
Yeah, we should dump it.
I think so too.
Yeah, I was saying New Mexico's trying to dump it as well. So yes, maybe we could make that happen. Maybe that's a project. May not be on our task though.
I don't know. Quite a lot to work on. So, okay, we'll give everyone another minute or so, and then we'll start with an intro and some questions. So I'm waiting for my tea to boil. I will be right back.
Hi, Leva.
Hi.
So are you calling in from Denmark?
Yes, I'm calling in from Denmark.
So
And
what
it's-
time is it there?
It's 9 o'clock in the evening.
So we are getting you after happy hour or before?
The nap hours are, hopefully the small one is sleeping and the older ones are still going to bed.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks for reaching out on LinkedIn.
Yes, thank you. Here you can see it's rather dark outside.
Okay. And Christina, where are you these days? She's on mute. Oh, wait, I scared her off. Okay. So I'm going to start us off with a question of the day. So I want you to start thinking about it. Since we started celebrating, we did Halloween last week. So I want you to think of what was a memorable Halloween costume that you actually wore. Okay. Hopefully everybody has worn one or enabled someone else to do that. So so I will go ahead and introduce myself, and then Eric, if you'll type that question in. And are you going to be our scribe? Is that what you're doing? Is that a thumbs up? Oh, okay.
Let me unmute. So actually, I think it would be useful if we could get somebody else to chime in as a scribe as well.
Yeah.
that way we've got more participation. So,
So-
yes, and
Okay, so Eric has put the agenda into the notes. And can I ask who's calling in from the 319 phone number?
This is Andy Stoll.
Oh, okay. Didn't recognize you, Andy. All right, hang on. I'm gonna type your name in, and if you can tell me who is on the 416 number, I can type your name in here too.
It's Jackie Sonkapiran. The last name is spelled C as in Charlie, S as in Sam, O-N-K-A hyphen P-E-E-R-E-N.
E-E-R-E-N. Wonderful. All right, hopefully I got that correct. And thank you all for joining us. My name is Cecilia Wessinger, and I am minimal voice, but I am one of your community activators. My focus is the ecosystem building practitioners. That's all of you working in, as Andy likes to call, your custom and bespoke ways. And we have on the call with us today a couple of our ESHIP champions. I see Eric Renz-Whitmore, who is currently in Albuquerque. Louisa Shepard, who is in Memphis. Hassan Bazi, who is in Detroit, hopefully as we speak. Otherwise, I'm mislabeling. And of course, many of you know our wonderful Norris Kruger, who is in Idaho. And we have a question of the day that we're just going to popcorn around. So you get to call in the next person. And the question is, because we celebrated Halloween last week, what is a memorable Halloween outfit you've actually worn? So I'm going to popcorn to Chad, who's had a little bit longer time to think about this.
Cool, thanks, Cecilia. The most memorable costume I ever wore was I painted my face as an emoticon back in the whole .com emoji thing. I had a nice little winky face and it was all very cute. And I might hop over to Eric.
oh boy, I don't often wear costumes. That is, I was a sort of very frightening butcher once with a rubber smock and some blood going on at one point. I'm not proud of it, but that's one thing I did. Hey, I see Samantha. How about we popcorn to you?
Thanks, Eric. So I'm Sam Steidel. I'm in Roanoke, Virginia, and I don't wear Halloween costumes. In fact, I'm lucky if I even notice that Halloween hit us. Usually I'm just working on my daughter's costume, and that's it. I will popcorn to Alistair.
Well, my own face is scary enough, so I don't need to wear a costume. I'll popcorn to Norris.
Oh, I'm unmuted. The two most memorable ones are would you rather hear the one I'd never want to do again or the one that was got me in deep trouble?
The first one.
Having a group of people, there are 6 of us wanting to go as a group costume and because there was a big prize for it. We went in giant cardboard tubes as a giant 6-pack of beer with the plastic thing holding them together. Absolutely marvelous, except for the moment came when you've got 3 men, 3 women, and somebody's got to go to the bathroom. If any of you have a solution for that, for that, let me know. But that was called not thinking ahead. We did win the prize though. So I'm gonna throw this to. We've got some new people on the call, so why don't I throw one to Alana? She's looking very nervous in her picture. So Alana.
Thank you. Great to join you all today. I'm excited for the first call.
My one of my favorite costumes, and I do love costumes, is I dressed up from Karate Kid when he wears a costume and he makes the whole shower curtain around himself. I walked through a windstorm in that and almost took flight one year. I will popcorn over to Louisa.
Cool. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I was having some weird issues with the audio. For me, Halloween, I usually try to do as little as possible in order to satisfy my friends wanting to dress up. So last year, I took lots of Post-it notes or like the name tags, the ones that say "Hello, my name is," and I my friend and we both did this, and we put like tons of different names all over the name tags, the sticky name tags, and we called ourselves identity thieves. So that was funny. Yes, I see some laughter there. Very, very clever. I try to be clever and spend as little time as possible. So with that, I will popcorn to Hassan.
Thank you, Louisa. Alana, that movie was just on this past weekend, and I saw that exact same scene that you were talking about from the Karate Kid. So I think generally whenever I've dressed up for Halloween, it's always been the obvious fallback thing for a guy, Dracula, vampire. But I think probably the most memorable one was I dressed up as Gene Simmons from Kiss one year with all of the makeup and platform boots, and yeah, that was an ordeal. Let's see, who hasn't gone yet? Jackie?
Hi, I thought maybe you'd forget me because I'm on an old-fashioned phone. So yeah, yikes. Let's see. The most memorable. You know what? I just like wigs, so I find it's fun to just put one on at Halloween and just go to the grocery store. Like it's the only time of the year, so I wouldn't say I really dress up in costume, but I just enjoy just the day.
And Jackie can't tell who's on, so I'm just going to go ahead and call on Olivia from Copenhagen.
Yes, here in Copenhagen, we don't do that much Halloween. It's starting the past years, mainly in shops, but it's not actually that part of the year where we dress up. So we do that for Fastelavn, which is in February. But I've been dressed up as a TV with a cardboard box or as a broom as a kid. So it's not to scare anyone. It's mainly to dress up as all sorts of things. And then we have a big barrel that we hit on, and out comes candy at the end of a lot of hitting goes into hitting the barrel. So that's a different tradition. That's when we dress up.
Will you pick on somebody, please?
Oh, yes. Who has not been? I don't know the whole roll of people who's been here. It's a lot of new names.
Looks like we've got Alexander.
Alexander.
All right, yeah.
Oh, I think you muted your.
Yeah.
You were muted and then non-muted, Alexander.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, so I haven't really, taken part in any Halloween activities, but when I was young, I was part of a fancy dress competition, and I dressed up as Charlie Chaplin, and that was fun.
Great. If you can call on somebody else.
Okay, Walto.
Yep.
Walto, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. It's Walter calling from Finland. So we don't also do too much Halloween here, but we do. It's increasing. But when I used to live in US for several years, then it was of course mandatory thing to do, to roll with the crowd. So the most memorable I think was Don King, the boxing promoter. So it's a natural fit for me, but it all started with the wig and then I had to roll with it. So it was fun. And I'll call Andy.
Okay, this is Andy. My memorable costume, I went as a hurricane. So I put a big plastic sheet over me and actually made a hurricane like you see on the radar out of cotton. And then my girlfriend went as the Weather Channel reporter, and we would just douse her with water, and she was holding a microphone. So the Weather Channel woman in the hurricane, that was the costume. You sort of have to see it to get it. That doesn't make any sense. I can't see who's left, so I'm going to defer my choice to you.
So we've got Stacy and Hayden and Christina.
Okay, I'm going to pick Hayden, who's new to his call. So I'm going to welcome Hayden by turning the question to you.
Hello.
Hi, this is Christina and someone from Puerto Rico.
Hello, guys.
So I think none of us really dressed up for Halloween. I think the most memorable thing I have worn is a pirate costume. How about you, Sam?
It's not necessarily me, but my roommates in college, they did something like an ice cream truck or something like that. It was quite big, you know.
Wow.
Like 3 people could fit into this like an ice cream truck made up out of like weird boxes and stuff like that. So
that's cool. Well, that's us.
All right. And I think Sam went, so I'll go back to Hayden.
Thank you, Cecilia. Yeah, my name's Hayden Murray. I'm located with the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. My favorite Halloween outfit is probably when I went as a bunny when I was in college. I had a Giants onesie outfit that was gray. So all I needed was some bunny ears, and I actually made a pretty decent bunny, I think. So that's probably my favorite Halloween outfit. I also cannot see who hasn't gone yet, so Cecilia, I'll defer to you.
Okay, so I've got Stacy and Michael Meek, right? So Stacy, what? You've muted yourself. Okay, go ahead.
There we go. So I think the most memorable is probably Bumblebee. In particular, I was a queen bee, so that was fun. And I'm in Durham, North Carolina with Forward Cities.
I guess we'll go to Michael.
Michael Meek.
Oh, you're unable to talk. Okay, you can't be worse than me. Can you type into the chat what you were? And has everybody gone?
Has Jackie gone?
Yes. Okay, so we'll let Michael pass. Although I would really pay good money to see a lot of you in your costumes. So thank you so much for being a good sport. Alana, where are you calling in from?
I'm in Washington, D.C.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so for the rest of the program, I'm going to turn it over to Eric and Norris. I think, Eric, were you going to introduce Alistair, who's our esteemed speaker today? Oh, so Norris is going to. Okay, so if you're following at home and wanted to learn more about all the things that are going on in the ESHIP community, I'm going to put a link into the ESHIP dashboard. So it has all the call recordings that have been around previously. We host these monthly calls, and we've added a facet of peer learning to this experience so that we can learn from each other and from others. So Norris, will you please introduce Alistair?
I was trying to decide whether I should see how much I could embarrass Alistair, but I'm a pretty smart guy, and when I meet people who are way smarter than I am, it always gets my attention, and it probably doesn't hurt that what he's been doing, what we've been talking about doing for a long time. He has a long, illustrious career, like me, started in physics and managed to escape. But he has been a consultant to industry, to the World Bank, to if there's a international organization that he hasn't consulted to and worked with, I would be very much surprised. What I love about my first run across him was, you're all familiar with Victor Wong's Rainforest book? Well, Alistair showed up with an effort to try to associate metrics. What does it mean to assess a rainforest? And I recommend that highly. And earlier this year, he wrote a book about that he'd like to share with us about. We live in a world that is complex. It is interconnected, it is nonlinear, but it's adaptive as hell. That what does it mean for, if we live in a world of complex adaptive systems, what does that mean for our work and for what we're doing, not just on this call? I put a link in the chat for Alistair's notes. He sent out a note. Many of you have seen those notes. And Alistair likes to take questions, so feel free to jump in. Am I getting it right, Alistair?
Yes, that's fine.
So, Alistair, I should shut up and let you talk.
So Alistair, will it be helpful if people type their questions into the chat and then we can circle back to them?
That's fine, or you can just ask. What I'll do, I'll make a brief introduction. I can share my screen, and but I don't want to give a boring talk for a long time. If you have questions, if you don't have questions, then I'll continue talking.
That would be great. I think it would be helpful if you would put your questions into the chat for Alistair, and we'll circle back with them. Thank you.
Let me just attempt to share my screen here. I guess to do that, you may have to give me permission. But anyway, let me begin. As Norris mentioned, what got me started on this and the genesis of the idea was the book, Victor's book on the rainforest. I've known Victor for a long time, and he was kind enough to send me sample chapters as he was developing the book with his colleague, Greg Horowitz. And I really like the metaphor of the rainforest and the farm. If any of you are not familiar with that, the idea is that if you want to produce products or even services in a nice, predictable way, then it's rather like having a farm where you plant all of the crops in neat rows, and you tear out all the weeds if they appear. It's a factory system. But in fact, that factory idea doesn't lead to all that much innovation, because it's not really intended to. It's intended to produce products which are the same all the time. The idea of the rainforest is where you have unpredictability. You don't have crops in neat rows. It is like, indeed, a rainforest where the roots of the trees in the rainforest are all interconnected and tangled up with each other. But that's the environment where you produce innovation. So it occurred to me that, okay, and this is the physicist in me which came out, that there has to be something behind this. The metaphor is great, but it has to be something that supports it. Otherwise, there has to be some science behind this. And Victor was also keen to see what could be found. At first, I thought, well, maybe I can't find anything. But then what came along is it became clear that what was behind this metaphor of the rainforest and the farm was something called theory of complex adaptive systems. Now, the problem with this is, of course, the word complex. As soon as we start talking about complex, then reaction of most of us is, oh, it's going to be hard to understand, it's difficult. And that's just a consequence of the way we use that word in everyday life. But there's been a lot of work done on these systems. And in fact, our lives are complex adaptive systems. Our lives are unpredictable. We have parts of our lives that are predictable, like farms. You know, if we, many of us, our daily life is fairly predictable. We may go to an office at a certain time of day. If we have money in a bank, we want our bank to be predictable. We don't want our bank to really engage in too many innovations. But then things happen in life, you know. Cecilia gets a sore throat she wasn't predicting. Tragedies occur sometimes. And so life is the rainforest with farms embedded in it. And in fact, if we look at systems in general, there's been a lot of work done in the past on systems theory, then that is what describes the rainforest. Let me just try, if you don't have what was sent out, the notes ahead of time, let me just see if I can share my screen again. And
yeah, you should be able to. I gave you host privileges.
yeah, I'm getting, let me try this.
There, look promising. Yes.
Okay, that should work. Okay. So for those of you who can read it, the book has a number of sections, 28 in all. These are deliberately, some of them fairly short, some of them longer. And they go into all the aspects of adaptive systems which relate to initially innovation ecosystems. That was my first interest. But in fact, an innovation interest is really the same as an innovation ecosystem. It's really the same as an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we want to look at some of the main features. I'm not going to go through them all. If you want to buy the book, which is here's a shameless promotion here. It's available in hard copy or a ebook version. But some of what is important for innovation ecosystems is to recognize that they're usually made up of a number of building blocks. Building blocks may, for example, an innovation system be an incubator, maybe an accelerator. It may be soft systems like knowledge, maybe mentors, maybe experience. And it's very useful to define these building blocks in an innovation ecosystem. And then we can look at, well, what connects these building blocks? Do we have good connections? Do we have poor connections? What problems need to be solved? What do we need to optimize in our ecosystem? So these are all features. And I'm just going to say one other thing is that the whole point of the theory of ecosystems is to develop tools and ways of solving problems. And to give one example here that came up from both my own experience and also in talking with ecosystem builders on Facebook, was it's fairly common for a community to have friction between a traditional economic development organization, which typically wants to attract businesses to the region, and friction between that and an entrepreneurship development organization that wants to focus more on startups. And there are reasons why each of those would be interested. So looking at the complex adaptive system picture, we can try to solve this issue by making sure that we have good feedback loops, connecting the building blocks of the economic development attractive organization, and the ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem development group. We can look at communications and mismatches, look at trust, decision-making, skills that may not be sufficiently distributed among all people, features that we may have copied from elsewhere but are really not appropriate for our use in this aspect. And we can come up with about 65 or more other questions like this. And they can then be ranked, strongly agree to strongly disagree. Those of you that may be familiar with the US Department of Economic Development, what is called a Baldrige evaluation system, which evaluates businesses, then the scale is very similar to that. So let me shut up there and see if there are any initial questions. And just tell me, if there are, just tell me when to stop.
Well, thank you, Alistair. I prepared some questions in advance since I know some of you are shy. However, I'm looking at the call and I don't know who the shy people on. So anybody have a question? Unmute yourself and holler out.
Yeah, I do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Alistair, thanks so much. Fantastic book. And I absolutely love the way it really unpacks all the different nuances of complex adaptive systems and aligns those with innovation ecosystem. It's really in-depth and well-researched. Really appreciate it. One of the things I'm exploring with regards to the ecosystem overall is if you think about the world as a system, in your view, how are you seeing the ecosystems overall adapt and what new forms are being created? And specifically, I'm looking at these things called backbone organizations and these additional collaborative bodies that we see emerging in regions, from Kaufman doing their ESHIP communities, Techstars doing their ecosystem building product now in Louisville, and MIT with their READ product. Would that be an example of the complex adaptive system then creating in itself these new forms? And are there other big movements you see as the overall system creating new structures to kind of, based on the feedback it's receiving?
Yes, Chad, thanks. I think those ones you mentioned are very good examples of self-organization and growth, because what excuse me, I take a drink of water here. What happens in systems of this kind, what happens in complex systems, is that they do adapt. And that's why the word adaptive is in there. So you have one system that is a catalyst for something else, and new systems grow. Those that are maybe not being effective, they will decay or change into some other form. So I think every example you've given is an example of an adaptive complex system. And we are seeing now more and more larger ones, corporate ecosystems, for example, is another one, innovation in corporations and businesses. And I think a lot of what we know about innovation systems in general will apply to these. I think we're seeing a growth of different kinds. The other question which people have asked me is, well, this sounds good and it's sort of interesting. We don't understand all of it, but would it apply to my ecosystem, which is very small? I'm interested more in supporting coffee shops. And I think the answer to that is a lot of it does apply. It is probably more relevant to large ecosystems, but it's relevant to where there is innovation. So you can have innovation in a coffee shop, or you can have innovation in a very technology-driven business, which is being supported by the innovation system. I hope that answers this question or helps.
So I have a question, Alistair. I'm going to try to get this all out, and then we'll share Jackie's question. Jackie, if you can type it in, we'll ask. So I was speaking with somebody, and my focus has always been to foster a community of belonging in which everybody can thrive. So if you feel like you belong in the community, then you're more apt to be free with your ideas and to collaborate and connect with people. And they asked me, how do you quantify or measure something like that? And it's like, how do you measure trust? How do you measure the value of relationships? And this being a method and metrics call, I didn't have really good answers for them, because I don't know that there's a way to show that. I said, I know that this ecosystem building thing is working, because before 2017, I had no idea what you were talking about when you talked about ecosystem builders. And now everybody that you talk to uses the word. So we're obviously doing something, because it's catching on, right? They don't quite know exactly what it means, but now they're using the terminology. So Alistair, I'm curious, as somebody who studies these methods, how do you explain to people that this is the thing?
It was only about 10 years ago that I first heard somebody talking about ecosystems. Somebody at IBM Research, in fact. And I'd spent a lot of my career in actually building support systems for organizations, particularly for technology commercialization. That is, businesses that were formed out of universities or research institutes, but they needed a community to support them. And a lot of my work was in former Soviet Union, and they were desperate for having these kinds of supportive systems because they didn't have any. So it has been growing, and we're seeing more and more people talking about it now, because I hope the reason is people have seen the value of looking into the fundamentals and indeed the science of ecosystems. And I think your first part of your question was, sort of how do we know it's working? And most measurements you can take are qualitative more than quantitative. Now, of course, it's true that even with a qualitative measurement, you can still stick a number on it. But as you say, it's difficult to measure trust. One project I worked on was a border project between Texas and Mexico. They wanted to measure quality of life and improvements in quality of life, because a lot of what you measure in an ecosystem is not an absolute measure, but a change. Celia, I'm getting your sore throat here. Amazing how that was transmitted. But you can look at change. How much has a measurement changed? So trust is an important factor in an ecosystem working well. You have to be able to trust people, have confidence in people. But another one is this idea, if you're looking at the table of contents in the book, it's number 20, the idea of noise and what's called housekeeping. You've got to have a certain amount of noise in an ecosystem. People need to be arguing with each other. They need to be asking a lot of questions. They need to be challenging each other. And this is the idea of housekeeping heap, which is a feature of the science of ecosystems. Housekeeping heat is a little like, you put a kettle on the stove and you just have it simmering there for when you need it to make a cup of coffee. So noise is the ability to just kind of simmer and then turn up the heat when you need to turn it up. And there's been quite a lot of research done that having some sort of noise in the system does improve the innovative nature of that system. So what we're doing here is to add to the noise. You know, we're discussing, we're talking. I would be delighted if someone was to tell me, I know, I think what you're doing is total rubbish, because then we could argue about it. So that would be increasing our noise. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but.
No, that makes sense. I think Jackie had a really great question that kind of aligns with that. Jackie, are you able to voice your question? Or we can read it. So,
can you hear me
Jackie's
now?
question-
Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
perfect.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Okay. So great. Yeah. Sorry, I'm calling from a public library, so I don't have my earbuds, so I have to just do it this way. But yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. And it's I sort of work in the same realm, but on the individual basis, and so I'm interested in kind of how that can be like transferred in terms of measurements of, say, unpredictability tolerance, complexity tolerance, ambiguity tolerance from the individual to the ecosystem. And if I don't know if there's been any work done on that, or if that's something that you think is important or not.
Well, I think it's important. It's a difficult question, and I don't have a very good answer, but let me do my best here. I think we need to separate unpredictability for a moment. That is to be expected in these systems. We can measure it to a certain extent qualitatively, not really quantitatively, by, for example, in the past, looking at events that happened that turned out to be unpredictable. There are some ways of first determining whether something unpredictable might be about to happen. And you can measure the stress that a system may be experiencing. And there are a number of ways of doing that. One way is to measure individual events that seem to be causing problems. So for example, if within a business, there's a lot of dispute going on, then that's a fairly good indicator of something called a bifurcation, that there are going to be splits in that business, which may not be predictable on the surface. Unpredictability, in a sense, is baked into an ecosystems. And it's possible if you try to measure it too carefully, you may in fact stifle it. And you really don't want to do that. Tolerance, then, separating that out, is really more a measure of, for example, trust is a measure of tolerance. Are we trusting each other? Wicked problems. Do you have any wicked problems? A wicked problem is a problem that doesn't have an easy solution or may not have a solution at all, as opposed to a tame problem, which you can easily see the solution. And there are many problem-solving techniques, and some of those cannot be used where there's unpredictability. So it's a great question. It's something that I'm certainly interested in. And I don't know of anyone who has much of a better answer than the one I just gave. But you made me think more about this, and I will be thinking about this and right after this call.
Oh, Alistair, that so if you things like the tolerance for uncertainty or tolerance for complexity, whatever you're looking at, we can sort of measure that at the individual level. There are some halfway decent measures of that, but how does that generalize? Do we give everybody the tolerance for uncertainty test and add it up, take the average, and does that give us a good score, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, that's a great question, because one feature of a complex adaptive system, which is important for entrepreneurial ecosystems, is that small changes have big impacts. You can, and this has been researched elsewhere, but you can have really what might seem to be a very small action that creates a big reaction. It's just a feature of these kinds of systems. So the difficulty that I have with collecting large amounts of data and then summarizing it, aggregating it and summarizing it in some way, you may lose some of these small effects because they get aggregated away. So for example, I may talk to 20 people, and one of them may say, we have a real problem because there are people of many different ages in our ecosystem. We don't have good trust between those of different ages. The other 19 may not mention this. When we aggregate all the data, that one factor may get aggregated away. So one of the things I'm working at the moment is looking into this idea of small data. What benefits can we gain from looking carefully at small data? So I think that's something we need to do, if that helps your question.
Sam?
Jackie, you have another question you want to follow on? Or we've got a couple more in the queue?
Sam, you had a question.
I'll think some more on it. Thanks. It's a lot to take in.
So Sam?
Sure. So thank you, Alistair. I really enjoyed that, and I have your book right here. Yes, so thank you. Thank you for taking the time to write that. My question is this: what are the biggest benefits for academic institutions in terms of measurable outcomes for supporting a local entrepreneurial ecosystem beyond tech transfer?
Well, when somebody doesn't have an immediate answer, they say that's a good question. So that's a good question, because the kicker for me was beyond technology transfer. If you hadn't said that, I was ready to go.
Right.
So let me quickly, Howard, do say something about technology transfer or commercialization, because I think it can lead into the broader issue, that it is so important to have a supportive community if you're trying to transfer or commercialize technology, and I'm sure you're well aware of that. So some of the things we learned from that over many years now, technology transfer commercialization has been around, we can extend to other parts of education. So for example, I first practical practice I would like to see is to teach more about complex adaptive systems, to teach more about those systems in which we live, in which we are embedded, in which we spend our days, and to show how a knowledge of these systems can help us in other ways. One example is, of course, in economics. There is a growing interest now in economics being described as complex adaptive system, because one of the recent Nobel Prize winners in economics talked about economics having been too mathematized, that was too much mathematical models, and they didn't always describe the real world, as we found out in 2008. So the complex systems in many cases can be a better description of economics, and economics, so that would be one way, not necessarily teaching in an economics course, so that would be valuable, but just teaching the need to know something about complex adaptive systems, economics in general. And I'd like to see the ideas get more traction in education. It's been a large part of my background. And in fact, I have people maybe look themselves at what can be done and say, you know, is this feasible? How would we do it? And I'd be very happy to work on that, look into that. So I think the immediate one is economics, but there have to be others, which I'll think about and get back to you.
Well, Alistair, Chad has a relevant question to that. Are you unmuted, Chad?
Yeah, you bet. Just along those lines,
Andy has to
Alistair.
wrap up.
Yeah, cool. Just briefly, and it ties into what you just said. How important is it for the broader community to have an understanding of complex adaptive systems? Obviously, there's a complex term. There's a lot to it. You wrote an entire book on it. Do we quote unquote dumb it down? Do we simplify it, or do only ecosystem leaders have an awareness of it, and we just kind of apply it in the background? How much can this be widespread knowledge, and to what benefit?
What I'm looking at doing now, sort of started, is to have, well, I don't know if I'm going to call it a dumbed down version, because a version that's a little more accessible, let's say. So started working on that. Also a website for the book, which will come out maybe in a couple of months. But yes, the aim is exactly yours, to make it more accessible. I wanted to begin with the science, because that's just where things led me after looking at Victor's book and trying to figure out what was behind it, led me in that direction. But Andrew, you're right, there is a need for a shorter version with many more examples, many more cases. There are cases in the book, but have many more, make it shorter and make it just something that's a more understandable and quicker to read. That won't be easy, but I'm starting on that.
Great, and
I'm
I
happy to
know
help if you
that,
do.
thanks. I know, Alexander, you wrote a couple of things into the chat, and there was kind of a looming question. You want to share that as our last question before we wrap?
Oh, I was just wondering if, you know, like for small rural communities, what kind of measures can we use? Like, for example, could we use the number of, you know, firms in that community, number of events taking place, number of entrepreneurs? Are these all, could these be like measures, or are there some things that can go further than that?
Those are measures, but they tend to be output measures or outcome measures, the results of what's happening in the ecosystem. And the point of all the work I've done, the point of the book, is to find out what goes on inside the ecosystem before it has outputs and outcomes, which is the reason of saying, you know, is there good communication? Is there trust? Is there beneficial noise? So your question is great. And I've been talking to others recently about rural ecosystems. So it would be very helpful for me if you could email me or call me either and give me your suggestions. I'd really like to hear your suggestions of whether we can measure and how, not just the numbers of this or that, which is the output, but what's happening inside the ecosystem, between the building blocks, among the people working, among yourself and your colleagues, for example. That would be tremendously valuable to help work on that as a next step.
Wonderful. So in the interest of time, and I think that because this is like the beginning of a conversation, and we really appreciate your energy, Alistair. You know, Slack is probably one of the best ways to continue engaging with each other so that we can continue sharing, if that's all right. Does that work with you, Alistair?
I think that would work very well. So any questions I didn't get to, any additional comments from Alexander or any others of you, please go on to Slack, onto to this call, version of this call on Slack, and I'll be very happy to talk with you.
Great. And if you don't have an invite to Slack, please email me at eshipgoals@gmail.com, and I'll make sure that you get into the page. This recording will live on the dashboard, which we included into the notes, the chat that's here, and I can follow up with that link. And I want to give an opportunity for anybody who's working on projects to be able to share if there's a quick 1 or 2 sentence summary of your progress since the last call. I know that at this time, my colleague is connecting with national resource providers, and we've had some discussions about how we can best show other resource providers besides Kauffman some of the projects that people are working on that would be in, I don't want to say in need of, but could be supported by other organizations. So if you have a project canvas, we'd love to make that visible. Alistair, I know you've shared one. We're going to get ready to upload that onto the dashboard. We're trying to figure out the best place to do that. So if you can email those project canvases in, that would be great. I wanted to give Andy and Hayden an opportunity to share if there's anything that's going on in the Kauffman world that we should know or share.
I mean, I can hop in. This is Andy. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm in a car.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's Andy from the Kauffman Foundation. I applaud Alistair for being one of the first people to put together a project related to the ESHIP goals, a project canvas. And if you haven't seen that, it sounds like that will be uploaded soon. So just first shout out to Alistair for putting together a project. You know, the goal of the work, of all of our work together, is how do we work together in mass collaboration to accelerate this emerging field of entrepreneurial ecosystem building, all the work that a lot of us are doing, maybe in our own little corners of the world. And if we all work together, we can build a field to provide the support structures and the training and the, the books and the education and the processes and the metrics to help us all do this work better. So, the Kauffman Foundation is particularly interested in supporting this conversation and encouraging it, but we don't have all the answers to that. So we're going to continue to support what we call the community infrastructure to be able to foster more collaboration across the network of practitioners. And so that looks like the ESHIP Summit. The next one is coming up. We've done 3 already in June of 2019. Hope that you'll be interested in attending to get folks that are interested in helping to contribute to building the field. And then we are very, very interested in ESHIP Goal 5, which is what this group is about. What are the processes and what are the metrics to measure ecosystems? We are working in a collaborative project with Forward Cities to work on a methodology for ecosystem building called the ESHIP Communities Program. And at some point in a future call, maybe Forward Cities folks can share about that. And then we continue to do and amp up our research team as we continue to think about metrics to measure ecosystems. And actually, Hayden, who is joining us on the call, has recently joined the Kauffman Foundation. He's an economist and really thinking a lot through the metrics of ecosystems. And Hayden is just getting used to where his desk is, but I do want to welcome Hayden to our team. And I think he'll be joining these calls on a monthly basis. So we're continuing on and excited to hear who else is working on all this stuff too.
Wonderful. Thanks, Andy. Eric?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for participating, in particular Alistair for sharing his wisdom and lots and lots of good information. We've got so many good participants on these calls that just, love that you all show up in such a meaningful way here, and encourage you to do so in Slack and our other venues as well. So thanks to Alistair and everyone.
So we have 19 participants, or had 19, maybe more at some point. Is that a above average size call?
Are you asking me?
Well, Celia, so are we slackers or are we rate busters? Or
Actually, I think the Goal 5 call has consistently a robust community. You're more and more international participants than most of the calls. I love seeing Valta and Livia and Chad on our calls because, and you know, Christina, you're like part US, part not. So so it's the exotic fun side that we love having here. And of course, Christina represents a community that that's a little bit more extended than some of the ESHIP community members that are working simply in their local system. So yes, you guys totally rock. And we play no favorites, but really it's wonderful. So I want to thank you all for your time. And is there anything else that you'd like to share to the whole crowd before we wrap up?
Well, we have got some great new people. Some of the folks that I look forward. I hope they will. Lebo will come back and join us. We promise not to ask you about Halloween again. Ilana had to jump. I put her website. She's actually been an ecosystem builder appears longer than we had the title. So I put her website in the chat. I think she's going to be also a very interesting addition. I'm just looking at it. I feel like there's an all-star team of folks here. And the sort of side benefit of this is that, you know, that some of these people, like Leva, that we have been recruiting people are starting to increasingly come from the academic world. So maybe we can come up some good questions for Samantha. There's all of a sudden a huge interest on the research side among my colleagues at the Academy of Management and the International Council for Small Business. So we have potential to bring in some really, you know, badass scholars, but they need to have great questions. And that's what I love about this group is you guys come up with great questions. And so we should also plug ecosystembuildershub.com. The storytelling groups, they have a great blog you should follow.
Right, yes. So there's a lot of storytelling going on. I know that your examples of storytelling are more around case studies, but ecosystembuilder.hub is definitely a great repository. There's also Social Venturers, Annika Horn's blog, and there's a podcast that you've all done. So all kinds of wonderful things. We'll put as much as we can into the agenda, and then everything else will be on Slack. So thank you all for your time. Alistair, you are a jewel. Thank you so much. I hope you don't catch what I have, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you all for taking part, and please contact on Slack.
Great. Thank you. Have a great week, everyone.
Okay. Bye.